Dr. Sam Amadi, you can see from the soundbite we got from our correspondent there in Bayelsa State that it appears that the mood is right and INEC appears to be ready tomorrow. What is the role? That was the question I was going to put to you the other time. What do you think the role of INEC's communication strategy played in creating the kind of mood that we have tonight?
Well, thank you for having me again. I think perhaps, ironically, INEC's failure to communicate effectively before now and INEC's postponement, as it were, of the election has created itself by default a better strategy. What I mean, first, you can see that the media has also closed up on this election more than ever before. We are sitting here in our rooms getting clear, correspondent reports as what's going on. That's number one. Two, so the media has more than ever helped INEC to communicate better to Nigerians. INEC has done what ought to be done. INEC has become more transparent and have a sense of responsibility. See, communication failures are at large a failure of empathy, of engagement. You see, oftentimes, I used to be chief executive too. When we sit there, we are so consumed in what we are doing, but we are not really thinking in terms of how people perceive what we are doing. And so up until that postponement, we didn't quite know exactly whether INEC was ready or not ready. We didn't quite know the details about INEC's planning. But right now, we now know where materials have been delivered. So it has great capacity to create trust. In other countries, I mean, you don't need to know what the electoral management body is doing. You know that election is tomorrow morning, you wake up in the morning, walk down to the street, you go and vote and go away. So the level of communication required in those situations may not be as we need here. Here, you really need to walk people through. You need to create, because we have a high level of distrust for public officials. Anything people say, oh, they're incompetent or they are compromised. So what INEC has done differently is that INEC has changed strategy, changed perception of themselves as an institution, see themselves more as an institution whose success actually depends on how much they communicate, engage with civic institutions. And if you look back at the way Jega managed the previous INEC, I think before now, there was greater civic engagement that INEC with institutions, civil society institutions, and media prior to this crisis. So what the takeaway now is that INEC has retooled, INEC has reinvested confidence in its communication channel. INEC has been more willing now to bring this Nigerian society, rooms, homes, and families into INEC's operation. It doesn't compromise their safeties and their integrity processes. It rather helps them to show up confidence. Because essentially, we are not going to be very sure. Not many of us has the skills to assess INEC's technical capabilities. So people just hear, oh, the materials have arrived in Yeregoa, and they are making their way to various polling units and centers. And they feel assured. They don't know whether data processes can be truncated. But the fact that they know that those essential materials are on their way to where voters we have to use them gives them a sense that INEC is working. Ultimately, until by perhaps evening to tomorrow, we won't be able to know the rate of success of INEC. But for now, INEC has been reinvested with confidence and trust. For now, people are a little bit more confident to have a free and fair poll. And so I would say three things. One, INEC officials have rediscovered the importance of public engagement and have perhaps honed their communication strategies and channels to really dwell on that. And secondly, the media, learning from the failure, has also been tremendously helpful. We see blow by blow, hour by hour reportage on sensitive issues around INEC, on critical, logistic issues around INEC. And so it has helped INEC, the media has helped INEC tremendously to win back confidence. And today, nobody is talking about INEC chairman resigning. Nobody is talking about INEC having screwed up. People are now saying, allow INEC do its job. So that's really an investment of confidence. And therefore, as a lesson going forward, all institutions in Nigeria should know that it helps you to carry the public along a communication strategy. And oftentimes, at the level of chief executive, this is very important. The INEC chairman has been speaking more often. Sometimes Nigerian agencies and institutions like to allow press people to brief the media. There's nothing more credible and authoritative and reassuring than the chief executive speaking often. So when you see Mahmoud Yakubu speaking, it gives authenticity. He has also done a great job of reinvesting INEC's independence. Think about when the president made that statement and reaffirmed by the military. INEC came out to say, look, without antagonizing the presidency, INEC came back to reassert its independence. So that statement says, look, we are going to deal with electoral offenses according to the law. So I see an INEC that has used communication to reestablish independence, very critical, reestablish competence. And then in a time that the parties are becoming to be, there's so much disregard or lack of confidence in the professional character of the military and the security forces themselves, INEC has come to say, look, we are going to manage the election in line with our power. So I think big plus is the INEC chairman's very clever and courageous declaration, restatement of his independence and of the integrity and competence of INEC going forward. Is big for a country like Nigeria and is big for elections here. Independence and competence. And INEC have done a great job on that.
Dr. Amadi, you seem to be very much in approval of what INEC has done. And I want to believe, I'm sure you think that the postponement of the elections by 1 week has actually allowed INEC to score the points that they've been able to score this time around, the information they've put out, and of course being able to carry the public along. So the question is, do you think it is as a result of the postponement of the elections that has enabled INEC to do the kind of good job they have done so far?
Yes, I think so. I think INEC, in retrospect, I think INEC wasn't prepared, fully as they assured us. And of course, we heard the INEC chairman point out 3 critical things. He talked about sabotage. We were not aware of this sabotage up until the cancellation or postponement. So if the election had gone ahead, INEC was not prepared. INEC was perhaps blustering, or INEC was perhaps, not clear-minded. Maybe they would have done half-half, who knows? But the postponement has helped INEC. First, shock therapy in leadership, also institutions perform when they are hit with shock therapy. INEC saw itself losing its integrity and its officials perhaps suffering, maybe grievous harm. There were news about removal, suspension, all kinds of stories out there. News about DSS inviting people whether they are room or not. So the INEC leadership this was a shock therapy for them. They kind of hit bottom and hit up again and say, look, we have to take our fate in our hand. They saw perhaps for the first time the gravity of the confidence, the trust and hope of Nigerians on INEC performance. Perhaps the crisis led them to also understand that this election is a matter of death and life, that people have invested hope on the outcome of this election. So somehow, this crisis reinvested and helped INEC to dig deep down and rediscover purpose, rediscover its competence and capability. And perhaps the people talked about lack of trust, lack of pulling together, distrust, and some kind of rivalry, sniping each other, and all kinds of dysfunctionality in terms of organization. Maybe, and I've been there, once your organization is under attack externally, the tendency is for actors to pull together, to forget their differences, and now survive as an institution. I think that postponement showed INEC that it was facing an existential threat, and therefore the leadership of INEC, in my view, came together and then perhaps overlooked some other differences and determined to get it right. And that postponement was like a tonic for INEC to reach deep into its research of intellectual and human resources and do a good job so far. I hope it continues to the end of this election.